Has Sean Payton finally settled on how he wants his Joker to look in 2025? Will the NFL be addressing some much needed rule changes in the upcoming season? And why, oh, why do the Denver Nuggets seem to struggle every time they're on national television? All things to come on today's rundown. And I want to begin with our Denver Broncos. As it appears, Sean Payton, George Payton, and the contingency of Broncos brass who are out in Indianapolis for the 2025 NFL Scouting Combine are doing their homework. And they're especially studious as it relates to one particular position of need, and that is the tight end position. As our own Andrew Mason, Cecil Lammy, and others have reported from live out there in Indianapolis, that the Broncos have met with virtually every major tight end in this upcoming draft class, from Tyler Warren at Penn State to Colston Loveland in Michigan to Gunnar Helm of Texas, Terrence Ferguson of Oregon, and Elijah Arroyo of the illustrious Mac School, Miami of Ohio. I think it's very clear based on the indications of these meetings and pre-draft conversations that they're having, and there will be more to come both this weekend at the Scouting Combine and later in Indianapolis. I think it's very clear that the Broncos and Sean Payton are extremely focused on upgrading and addressing that position. And I think that this hints that the most likely position that Sean Payton will look to try to fill that Joker role within his offense is going to come at the tight end position. We've seen it more recently filled by the likes of Alvin Kamara and even Reggie Bush at the running back position. We've seen Michael Thomas play certain elements of that in the slot and kind of as the slant god in Sean Payton's Saints offenses for so many years. But some of the best examples, from Jimmy Graham to Jeremy Shockey, of that Joker role came at the tight end position. And I think that that's because the tight end has a unique ability to impact all three phases of the offensive side of the football, in terms of not just running and catching the way that a running back can do. And running backs can be involved in pass protection here and there, but there's not really a lot of dynamic nature to that. But what a tight end can do in line along the offensive line, as a pass catcher, as a member of the run game, either as a blocker or even getting involved with motions and things in the backfield and being split out wide as a wide receiver. There's just a lot of versatility there in terms of what you can do with a tight end. And I think that Sean Payton is clearly gearing up to make one or even two selections at that position to help try to find his Joker. It seems unlikely that Tyler Warren, the standout tight end out of Penn State, will be there when the Broncos are drafting at number 20. Colston Loveland certainly seems to be more in line for somebody that the Broncos could take in the first round. He's certainly been the most mocked player at that position. But I think it's important that we put these other names of these other tight ends, from Terrence Ferguson to Elijah Arroyo and what have you, in our minds, because there's very distinct possibility that the Broncos don't address tight end in the first round, be it the running back position. If Ashton Genty were to fall past the Cowboys at 12 and be an option for the Broncos, I think that would be very difficult to pass up. If they decide to go defensive tackle or inside linebacker, even in the first round, and kind of shore up what could soon be a position of need, even though it isn't necessarily right now, and help keep that defense coming at the level that it needs to in order for the Broncos to continue the trajectory that they're on. So I think it's important that we learn these other tight ends, because there's a very real possibility that position doesn't get addressed until the second, maybe even the third round, at least for the first time in the NFL draft. So curious to see how it catches your eye, because to me, the fact that they've met with all of the major tight ends in this draft class, they've met with a handful of significant running back names too, that I want to get into next week as we kind of continue to look at positions and areas where the Broncos are going to be focusing. But I really find it interesting that they've put such an emphasis on meeting with these tight ends, given the hole in the roster that we have and the need for Sean Payton to have that X factor Joker type player addressed in that way. So curious to hear your thoughts, whether or not you think tight end is a position that they should address in the first round, or where you think it might make the most sense, and any other names maybe that weren't on the list quite yet that the Broncos have met with, because again, they're only able to meet with whoever's at the scouting combine. As it relates to the Denver Nuggets, man, I just don't get it. This is a team that we know has the capability and the potential to play at least a conference finals level of play, even if they haven't always continued to return to that NBA Finals caliber that we saw back in 2021, 2022. But it really just starting to feel to me that the Denver Nuggets have a similar vibe to the first season of Russell Wilson with the Broncos. That iteration of the Broncos in 2020, what would that be? 2023. This feels like the 2023 Broncos. That Broncos team with Russell Wilson in his first year got a slew. I believe it was 5 in total primetime games that NFL season. And every single one made it harder and harder to keep your eyes open. It felt like that scene in Bird Box where they're forcing the eyes open, like you have to watch this. And whether it was like the 13-11 game against the 49ers, or the game where the Broncos take and the Colts go to overtime at Empower Field at Mile High, and you have home team fans leaving the arena at the start of overtime in a home game. And that's kind of how it just feels like the Nuggets have been lately on national television, most recently with the Milwaukee Bucks and the LA Lakers, that every time all eyes are on the Denver Nuggets. And we've seen what that can do in terms of public awareness and the advancement of certain narratives, whether it's for MVP consideration, award consideration, or really just a general vibe in the way that the team is covered and addressed on a national level. The best opportunity to impact those decisions and those narratives is when you're playing on national television. And at least in the last 2 instances, man, the Nuggets have just fallen flat. There were so little shooters around Nikola Jokic against Milwaukee that even Nikola Jokic in a triple-double performance, yet another one, I believe he's nearing 55 or 60, or 55, I should say, at this point in the season. It's not enough. Giannis grabbed a season-high amount of rebounds with 19 to go to with 28 points, and I believe it was 7 assists. And Milwaukee just was able to complement the pieces around Giannis and take advantage of the fact that the Nuggets, for good portions, at least of the beginning of that game, couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. Michael Porter Jr. struggled again from a shooting perspective. And it just becomes one of those things where it feels like we're again weighing in our minds of like, we've seen what Michael Porter Jr. can look like at his best, and we've seen what I believe is to be near his ceiling when he's at his best, but it's a good ceiling. And he's proven to be an impactful role player or core member of a championship organization, even being the third, or fourth option at times in that rotation. He's still in that rotation and an important piece of it. And man, it just feels like he has had more games than not, especially he's had such a tough 4-game stretch coming off of some of the better basketball of his season before the All-Star break. His post All-Star break 4-game stretch here that he's in the middle of has just been brutal. And I don't really know, kind of like we talk about with Jamal Murray, there just doesn't seem to be a lot you can do to fix it. Shooters have to shoot. So it's not so much a matter of Michael Porter Jr.'s poor shooting coming from a volume perspective. It's just that you have to believe at some point the coin is going to flip, that the tide will stem the other direction. And those shots that he rims out, or that he messes up a 5-on-3 transition basket opportunity, that those are just going to fall the Nuggets' way. And it's just a war of attrition to be able to survive and maintain up until that point. And that's a tough position to be in if you're Denver, because if there's truly nothing major that you can do, you don't have really many other options to turn to, because Jamal, he hasn't quite eclipsed some of those peak performances that we were seeing coming into the All-Star break, where he was playing some of the best basketball of the season. He hasn't quite returned to that level consistently thus far, but he's doing okay. He's doing what he's needed to do, I would say, by and large, even if it's not overly impressive. It's Jamal. It's good for Jamal. And Aaron Gordon is doing the same. Christian Braun has, in my opinion, overperformed as a starter in his first year as a part of this rotation and filling in for the void left by KCP. But he's not always going to light up the scoreboard. I think his contributions are more consistent on the defensive end than they are on the offensive end. And so if you're the Nuggets and you're shooting at like 25% from beyond the arc and you're shooting under 50% from the field, even though Milwaukee matched some of those statistics percentage-wise, you just gave up too many opportunities to try to take advantage of a team that's led by another multi-time MVP and superstar in Giannis. And it really just feels like, in terms of international superstars, Jokic and Giannis were like the two that broke through that mold. And, Giannis got to the championship level and the MVP level first, but Jokic has since matched the championship aspiration and has surpassed the MVP collection. And it just really feels like what a fun matchup that we have between these two. Although it didn't go the Nuggets' way in this most recent iteration, they will have another chance in about a month at home to be able to stamp the rubber match. But it really just feels like this is a potential clashing of superstars that should be fun and electric to watch. And what we got, I think, was by and large kind of frustrating, especially from the Nuggets perspective. So I don't know what it is about the Denver Nuggets and why the timing of their national TV games, they don't seem to play that well in those instances. But I'm starting to be okay if they just don't have many more national TV games. Let them grind away in silence, whether that's success or struggle. Let it happen on the back burner, get to the postseason, and just see where the dice roll from there. And that's kind of, I think, where we're at. But it is a Friday, and I don't want to end on a sour note as it relates to the Denver Nuggets, who will have more opportunities to get back on the hardwood and kind of rebound from this little bit of a slump that they've been in as they continue their road trip. I want to end on a little bit more of a positive note, and that is I want to give a golf clap, a little bit of a small applause to the NFL and specifically their Competition and Rules Committee, who appear to finally be getting with the times. And what I mean by that is that we have one announcement coming from the Rules Committee that it sounds like is going to definitely be implemented. And we have another one in consideration that I think, while maybe less annoying or less egregious, is just a good balancing move heading into the next season. The move that we are going to see is the implementation of electronic first down markers. Essentially, we are going to kiss goodbye to the reliance on the chain gang. It was reported earlier this week that the NFL is going to implement those changes and use the chain gang as a backup. And they are going to move to a laser-focused targeting system that will provide much more accurate data about where the ball is going to be marked. We already have microchips in the football. We can tell how far and how fast, with what angle of exit velocity, quarterbacks throw the ball on any given play. And it creates some fascinating content and discussion pieces as it relates to the evaluation of players year to year and game to game. And yet we still rely on two 65-year-old men with sticks connected by a piece of chain link to decide whether or not a player got far enough on any given play based on eyeball analytics. And I am happy to say that we are finally getting rid of that. Ari Myrov from My Sports Update posted a summation of it, saying that the NFL says that its plan is to put the electronic system to measure first downs into motion this upcoming regular season in 2025. The chain gang would remain as a backup, but it is finally happening. And it's important to note that the UFL, the United Football League, the latest in iterations of offshoot football leagues that try to compete or capitalize on America's infatuation with American football. The UFL implemented this in 2024. They had a series of 4K cameras spread out at multiple points throughout the arena and along the field. And it's similar kind of in nature to what they call the Hawkeye system in Major League Tennis, where you've all seen the animation where if they're trying to determine whether or not a ball based off of a serve or a volley landed inbounds along the back line, you can see they go to like the animation graphic, and we can tell with like fraction of a centimeter accuracy where the ball lands on that out of bounds line and how far the determining factor is for it to be in versus out. And they do this in real time, live during a game. And I think there are some detractors who may say this is going to slow down the pace of play and this is just going to add more time to this and to that. And my answer to that would be, how do you know? We don't know, for one. For two, we've already seen it implemented in other leagues that can be used as a blueprint where it wasn't incredibly disruptive. And let's not pretend like we don't all already consume about 16 minutes of actual live football action during a 4-hour football game. And we eat it up. I do, you do, week after week, year after year, preseason, postseason, regular season, doesn't matter. We already are okay with that. So let's not pretend like this is suddenly the straw that's going to break the camel's back. I think this is a great a fantastic thing. The Josh Allen egregious spotting against Kansas City in the postseason of this past year should be a thing of the past. We are no longer reliant on the eyes and ears and guesstimations of some underpaid, not full-time referees who, frankly, don't have any business deciding the massive importance that goes onto each of these plays, downs, what have you. It's similar to how do we not feel this way about home plate umpires in baseball? Why do we even have to know who Angel Hernandez is or was, because he's no longer affiliated with Major League Baseball? But all of these, why do we have to know that? The only reason we do is because of this inherent, incessant desire to keep the human element inside of officiating and in sports. And I'm not saying that we need to turn the world over to robots. I don't need to get on that political soapbox. But what I'm saying is I think we can do a little bit better with the technological advancements and the capabilities that we have and the amount of money, time, energy, and focus that is poured into these professional sports as an entertainment product. We can do a little bit better than a couple of old farts running out there with two sticks separated by 10 yards of chain link fence to determine whether or not the offense can continue on the field. The other rule that's coming into consideration, it's not going to be implemented for sure, and it hasn't been approved yet, but is the decision to make the overtime rules for the regular season and overtime consistent. In the regular season, it is still kind of a sudden death situation, and it's the next score. Whereas in the postseason, there is a guarantee that both sides get to touch the football on offense. And this was, of course, famously kind of brought up by, again, a Josh Allen versus Kansas City moment where Josh Allen led his team down the field to take the lead with 13 seconds left in the game. The Chiefs were able to force overtime, and then Patrick Mahomes did not give Josh Allen a chance to touch the ball in overtime by winning the coin toss, taking the ball, and scoring first. So I think it absolutely makes sense to mirror these two rule sets together. However it is in the regular season is how it should be in the postseason, because you're still playing the same sport. There's not a foundational change as it relates to how the game is played or there shouldn't be, how it's in the regular season versus how it's played in the postseason. So I am all for this. I think it makes sense. Hasn't really been a massive issue for the Broncos, in terms of getting bitten by this rule, the way it seems that Josh Allen and maybe some other quarterbacks around the NFL have been, particularly at the hands of Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. I think it's been since the middle of the 2022 season. I believe it was week 11. The Raiders beat the Broncos 22-16 by taking advantage of the sudden death first score overtime situation as a touchdown versus a field goal. So while there's not a huge hometown rallying cry around this as it relates to the Broncos, I just think we need to start doing things that make sense in life, let alone in professional sports. And this to me makes sense. So I wanted to make sure, because I knew the conversation around the Denver Nuggets was going to be a little bit of a bummer because they dropped another one on national TV against a good team. And it's starting to feel like, we had this conversation about the Denver Broncos this past season of who have they beat, what's their record about teams over 500. Well, the Nuggets seem to kind of be trending in that direction. They can go 9-0 against teams that are sub 500 or, kind of in the basement as it relates to the NBA's playoff standings. But then you start facing, equal or better competition, and that shine starts to wear off a little bit. But I wanted to end on a positive note, giving the NFL a little bit of a golf clap and a nice little moment to say, hey, thank you. Please don't ever make me watch the chain gang run out onto the field unless there is a fire or some kind of emergency, and they're the only option that we have left. There's still so much I want to get into as it relates to the scouting combine, which will wrap up this weekend. I want to get into some running back conversations and things that the Broncos have been reported to have had out there in Indianapolis, and kind of take a further look forward as it relates to the Colorado Avalanche, who now have Val Nichushkin back in the lineup, hopefully without any other further setbacks, and just how differently the dynamic looks between them when he's on the ice versus off. And then we have, before you know it, the NBA postseason will be here, and we'll be having more conversations that relates to the Denver Nuggets. So much more to get into starting on Monday of next week. I will catch you at the same time in the same place then.